Borrowed Power is a collection of essays addressing the complex and significant issue of cultural appropriation, particularly focusing on the protection of intellectual and cultural property, especially within indigenous communities. The essays, penned by esteemed scholars in law, anthropology, and cultural studies, offer original and insightful perspectives on this topic. Authored by renowned figures like Bruce Ziff and Rao, the book's introduction sets the stage for a thorough examination of cultural appropriation. Divided thoughtfully into 6 parts, the book's structure facilitates a comprehensive exploration of various aspects of this phenomenon. Each essay delves into a specific facet of cultural appropriation, providing extensive references for further study. The central theme of the book revolves around the appropriation of cultures, particularly indigenous ones, and the implications thereof. It interrogates the nuanced meanings of appropriation, the values and concerns involved, and the necessity for legal responses to address this issue. Throughout the essays, there is a consistent argument that cultural appropriation has detrimental effects, eroding cultural identity and threatening diversity. Of particular concern is cultural assimilation, where minority groups are pressured to adopt the cultural practices of dominant groups. The book effectively portrays cultural appropriation as a pervasive phenomenon with various manifestations, affecting inter-community relationships in complex ways. It argues against cultural assimilation, and emphasizes the importance of preserving cultural diversity. The editors are commended for assembling a diverse array of perspectives from scholars across disciplines, fostering interactive debate. By including both objective analyses and personal accounts, the book offers engaging and enlightening reading material. While discussing a wide range of cultural appropriation practices, the book focuses on those with significant political implications in contemporary society. Many essays concentrate on indigenous peoples' struggles to assert their rights to cultural heritage, while others address issues within Black American culture. Contributors express concerns about cultural degradation, misrepresentation, and commodification, highlighting the risks of cultural artifacts being lost or destroyed. Some essays emphasize the aesthetic and stewardship aspects, arguing against the central focus of the appropriation debate is the examination of power dynamics between dominant and subordinate cultures. This collection of literature, spanning diverse fields, effectively sheds light on the intricate issues surrounding cultural appropriation, not only for Canadian readers, but for a global audience. Of particular importance is the recurring question raised by several essays regarding the role of law, especially property law, in addressing appropriative practices. The consensus among authors is that current intellectual property regimes in the US and Canada are inadequate to tackle these issues, particularly concerning the protection of indigenous knowledge, notably in the realm of ethnobiology. This is unfortunate, as well-framed property rights have the potential to counteract oppression resulting from cultural appropriation and empower minority cultures. The book is structured into 6 parts, each addressing a specific aspect of appropriation: music and musical forms, art and narrative, colonial and post-colonial discourse, popular culture, science, and tangible cultural property. Below is a brief commentary on each section and the individual essays contained within. Part I explores the appropriation of musical forms and works. Perry A. Hall's essay, African American music. Dynamics of appropriation and innovation examines how African American music has been appropriated by dominant white culture. Hall emphasizes the detrimental impact of appropriation on black music, resulting in the loss of its distinctive qualities and economic exploitation without compensation. Despite these challenges, Hall remains optimistic about the resilience of black culture. Anthony Seeger's essay, Ethnomusicology and Music Law, delves into the ownership issues surrounding indigenous music, and the challenges of reconciling customary forms of ownership with U.S. copyright laws. Seeger's pragmatic approach highlights the need for a culturally sensitive treatment of musical works, and a deeper understanding of the various regimes that protect musical forms of property. Part 2 focuses on appropriation in art and narrative, particularly in the context of the Canadian controversy surrounding voice appropriation. Lena Kishig-Tobias's essay, Stop Stealing Native Stories, condemns the cultural theft of native stories by non-native writers. Kishig-Tobias highlights the devastating impact of this practice on indigenous communities, and urges the Canadian cultural industry to cease profiting from the retelling of native stories. Rosemary J. Coombs' essay, The Properties of Culture and the Possession of Identity, Post-Colonial Struggle and the Legal Imagination, delves into the discourse surrounding cultural appropriation in Canada. Drawing from both legal and anthropological perspectives, Coombs examines the dominant discourses of Romanticism and Orientalism within this debate. She critiques the reliance on post-colonial approaches, arguing that questions of cultural ownership and representation are ethical rather than legal matters. Emna Bees Phillips' essay, The Disappearing Debate, or How the Discussion of Racism Has Been Taken Over by the Censorship Issue, explores tensions arising when discussions of voice appropriation in. Phillip argues that in Western societies, censorship often supersedes discussions of racism, reflecting the privileging of censorship discourse within liberal democracies like Canada. In Reappropriating Cultural Appropriation, Quaime Dawes discusses funding for minority artists as a response to appropriation issues, highlighting the political dimension of arts funding. Dawes advocates for a restructuring of funding agencies to include non-white artists in the artistic mainstream, challenging the dominance of white values and Western culture. Joanne Cardinal Schubert's essay, In the Red, addresses the lack of protection for native and tribal copyright internationally. Cardinal Schubert discusses the exploitation and commercialization of native art and culture by dominant white society, calling for revisions to intellectual property laws, and a return to strong personal ethics among artists. Part 3 examines cultural appropriation in colonial and post-colonial discourse. Jonathan Hart's essay, Translating and Resisting Empire, Cultural Appropriation and Post-Colonial Studies, explores the role of cultural appropriation in imperialism and post-colonialism, emphasizing the complexities of identity and resistance in cultural exchange. J. George Claude Alva's essay, Nahua Colonial Discourse and the Appropriation of the European Other, discusses the use of colonial discourse by the Nahuas of New Spain as a tool for resistance against Spanish domination and adaptation to colonial conditions. Part 4 delves into appropriation in popular culture. Nell Jessup Newton's essay, Memory and Misrepresentation, Representing Crazy Horse in Tribal Court, analyzes the commercial appropriation of native culture, and the legal implications of such appropriation, using a lawsuit involving Crazy Horse malt liquor as a case study. Deborah Root's essay, White Indians, Appropriation and the Politics of Display, examines the phenomenon of wannabe individuals dressing in ethnic attire, particularly Native American clothing, and its implications for cultural commodification and colonialism. Root calls for a transformation of Western traditions to untangle them from racist versions of the past, through solidarity politics. Part 5 delves into the realm of scientific knowledge and other forms of intellectual property appropriation. James D. Nason's comprehensive piece, Native American Intellectual Property Rights, Issues in the Control of Esoteric Knowledge, navigates the complexities surrounding the control of Native American intellectual property. Nason provides insightful commentary on legislative efforts such as the Native American Graves Protection and Repatriation Act of 1990, and addresses the challenges posed by patenting life forms derived from indigenous knowledge, particularly in medicinal plant use. Naomi wrote Ariasa's meticulously researched essay, Of Seeds and Shamans. The appropriation of the scientific and technical knowledge of indigenous and local communities delves into the appropriation of scientific and technical knowledge of indigenous communities by corporations engaged in biotechnology and genetic engineering. Wrote Ariasa proposes various mechanisms to counteract this appropriation, emphasizing the importance of recognizing indigenous communities as stewards of scientific knowledge and ecological resources. Part 6 focuses on issues concerning appropriation and tangible cultural property. In his contribution, Beyond Repatriation, Cultural Policy and Practice for the 21st Century, James D. Nason argues that American repatriation legislation represents just the beginning of addressing concerns surrounding museums and legislative bodies' control of material culture. Nason provides a detailed analysis of Native American cultural property issues and maps out the implications of the Native American Graves Protection and Repatriation Act of 1990. The final essay presents an important case study. In A Coming Together, the Norton Allen Collection, the Tohono O'odham Nation, and Arizona State Museum, Lynn S. Teague, Joseph T. Joquin, and Hartman H. Lomawema, document the repatriation of cultural property from the private collection of Norton Allen to the Tohono O'odham Nation. This case study offers insights into collaborative efforts between indigenous communities and museums.